Well, it's always smart to watch where you walk, especially in a city like New York City. But as new research shows, the number of pedestrians killed on U.S. roads and streets has increased by more than 80% since reaching a record low back in 2009. It's a staggering spike and one that needs both human and infrastructure changes to bring those numbers down and down quickly. Joining us now is Robert Sinclair, Senior Manager of Public Affairs with AAA. Robert, great to see you. How are you?
I'm well. Good to see you.
So what does the data say here in the 5 boroughs, and what specific measures do you believe New York City officials should take to address pedestrian fatalities? It's something we have talked about all the time.
Yeah, well, actually, in the 5 boroughs, we're kind of bucking the national trend. Back in 2009, the first year of the study by the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety, in New York City, 158 pedestrians, unfortunately, were killed. 54% of them at night. Now, the total number has gone down. The last year of the study was 2022, and in that year in New York City, 129 were killed. But the number at night, the percentage at night, went up to 59%. And we're finding that it has a lot of things to do with infrastructure. Things like, usually it's happening in poorer neighborhoods too, and where more people are walking, especially to public transportation. And we find that there are inadequate lighting, poor crosswalks, and lack of continuous sidewalks. So those infrastructure improvements could be made, but the human factor comes into play as well, and that can be a big change that would help as well.
You've got so many things going on here, especially in New York City. You've got bike lanes everywhere. You've got motorized bicycles that are going in the wrong direction, that basically don't even follow the red light, green light principles that most of us need to abide by. And you've got pedestrians who aren't paying attention with their heads buried in their phones. So it's really kind of a dangerous cocktail when you factor it all together.
It really is, and I worry that the education isn't there. Back in the 80s, we had big campaigns about wearing seatbelts, and there was 90 to 95% compliance. That education has kind of fallen off, and we're seeing that folks aren't wearing their seatbelts when they're behind the wheel, and there's lots of other bad driving behaviors that's happening. Their drivers are speeding, and they're distracted, and that plays into the situation, and pedestrians as well. You mentioned the smartphones. Their heads are buried in these things, and unfortunately they get distracted and just walk out into the street. Now, when I was growing up, we had a song, don't cross the street in the middle of the block. Use your eyes to see, use your ears to hear. Walk up to the corner when the coast is clear. We don't have that anymore, unfortunately, and that's part of the process. There needs to be more education.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, jaywalking can be potentially deadly, especially here in the city with the way people are on the roads. You talked a little bit before about dark roads and dark city streets obviously being a primary concern and a leading cause of death for pedestrians. Is that just because of reduced visibility, or is there some other reason in that?
Well, reduced visibility is certainly part of it, but we're seeing in the last couple of years that more crashes are happening during daylight, so that tends to point to the lack of attention and irresponsibility on drivers and pedestrians. We think that a safe systems approach needs to be used, where you're looking at the data, you're crunching the data, sort of like CompStat with the police, that they crunched the data and found out where the problems were specifically, and going to those areas and making the needed improvements and needed changes. It has to do with infrastructure, but infrastructure improvements are expensive. I remember seeing a study at one particular crash-prone intersection at a southern city, and they did things like repaint the lane markings and the crosswalks. They added more storage for left turn cars making left turns, increased the size of the storage area so more vehicles could fit there. They changed the timing of the traffic lights so pedestrians would have more time, and also they changed the lights themselves. They made them bigger and brighter, and the pedestrian signs bigger and brighter. All those things play into the situation.
Robert, I got about 30 seconds here before I let you go, but we're talking here that it's kind of dual responsibility, both the driver and also pedestrians. What tips would you give both in order to stay a little safer out there?
Well, drivers certainly need to stay alert. They need to follow the speed limit. They should not drive impaired by alcohol. Unfortunately, more and more these days, marijuana. And don't rely on the vehicle safety systems. These ADAS technologies, advanced driver assistance systems, they don't work all the time, and they are especially compromised at night. And pedestrians should use crosswalks, obey traffic signals, look both ways, don't walk in the street, and don't walk while texting.
If everybody would just pay attention a little bit more, we wouldn't be talking so frequently about this. Robert, thank you. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Sinclair, Senior Manager of Public Affairs with AAA. We always thank you for being with us.